Hello all, Casual Noob Gamer back at you with another video. Oh yeah. Oh, what is this on my face? I guess I'm getting a pimple or something. Who knows what that is? Anyway, this video is going to be, it's kind of a repeat of something I had talked about in the past, but just expanding on it because we've gotten new information. So basically, Gamescom just happened recently, and at Gamescom, I guess Digital Foundry was there because that's where I had heard this at one of their videos that they have put up on YouTube, where basically they talked about, or maybe they put it in a tweet or something, but somebody from Digital Foundry basically said that they talked to a lot of developers at Gamescom, and a lot of the developers were saying that it was very difficult to get a Switch 2 dev kit. So, that being said, I want to give reasons that I believe that basically these developers are having a hard time getting these Switch 2 dev kits. Now, we know that the tariffs are a situation that I believe Nintendo, and I know PlayStation also was trying to do this this move where they basically put as many systems in the US before the tariffs went into place, so they could then sell those and kind of ride it out to maybe, maybe possibly we'll get another pause on the tariffs or whatnot. So while they still had a chance. So that, number one, may have been the reason that they just basically didn't have enough components to make these dev kits when they're trying to get the systems into countries that are putting tariffs out, and basically getting them to the consumers, that because of maybe how many systems that they could produce, because that is the rate limiting factor, and something that Nintendo has been trying to do with Switch 2s is that they've been trying to get as many systems out there and flood the market. So basically, you could combat scalpers also, so that people who want the system won't have to resort to paying, obviously their high prices that Nintendo is charging, but they wouldn't have to pay them to scalpers. But another reason that I believe it is because if you look at like the game that was in the direct, Chillin' by the Fire, that was a smaller indie studio that made that, but apparently the company that made that game, number one, they're using the game chat feature with the cameras, so they're using functions of the Switch 2, so there are Switch 2 functionalities in their game, which would warrant it, because Nintendo, I think from what I've heard rumor-wise, is Nintendo is basically asking developers what in your games would warrant the need for a Switch 2 dev kit. But also that studio, I believe people have looked into it, and the people who are making that game also had something to do with Chibi Robo, which was a game that was on Nintendo, and is actually one of the games that's coming to the GameCube NSO. It's actually out right now, so that's one of the games that kind of like maybe they told Nintendo, hey, we'll free up the license for Chibi Robo, so you guys can put that on your NSO as long as you get us a dev kit so we can work on Switch 2 versions of games. Because right now, if you're looking for games if you have a Switch 2 and you're looking for games that are specifically for Switch 2, it's not that there aren't a lot of them, but there aren't a lot of smaller indie games like that. So you would kind of have that market to have that discoverability when people are like, "Hey, I got the new system, I want to switch to game." And then also, I think that Nintendo is basically also giving development kit priority to game studios that have supported Nintendo, especially during the Wii U times when a lot of studios dried up and kind of, left and didn't really show up. And then they're also doing it as a bargaining chip to get certain places back, like, studios like EA that was pretty much non existent on the Switch and definitely the Wii U. Really, they haven't done a game for a very long time. They had some games. I think they started out with something on the Wii U. I forgot what it was, but then like a lot of the companies just up and left. But I definitely see the companies that were supporting Nintendo during the early days of the Switch, when people had to trade. Nintendo basically had to trade on their Wii U. I'm going to call it a success, but obviously it wasn't a success. They sold, I think, only like 13 million consoles, so they didn't sell a lot. So if there's no install base, developers are like, if I put my game out there, how many people can I realistically like sell to? It's only as many as are on this install base, especially if the game is only available digitally. People aren't gonna buy 2 copies for themselves, especially if it's a game key card where the game is not on the cartridge. I mean, unless you're a reseller. So I think Nintendo is prioritizing, because we don't know officially that Yacht Club Games has a Switch 2 development kit, but because obviously they can't, if they do and they're under some sort of NDA, they can't talk about that. But it seems like that game, I mean, right now it's running at 120 hertz, but the way it's running at 120 is they just did, I guess, a method. I believe it's how they did it. They did what's basically an uncapped frame rate, because the option in the menu is just use the maximum frame rate or something like that. So it just, if you do that with your games, a lot of games, because of the Switch 2 capabilities of the hardware, games will move higher. That's why certain games, without even having updates, if they have uncapped frame rates, will run better just naturally without having to do anything. So I think that a big thing is that Nintendo is prioritizing. Number one, they're giving to developers that supported Switch when it was a gamble, because they're giving, obviously, Square Enix has one, because Final Fantasy VII Remake is on there. FromSoft has got one because they have an exclusive game that's coming to Switch 2 with the Duskbloods. So basically, yeah, that is what I think is going on. I think that they are prioritizing, and I think it's also, the component shortage. They don't have a lot of these things to give out, and they're trying to prioritize it according to where the tariffs are really impacting, and they're worried about sales. So they want to get in there. I believe that at this point, the tariffs are back on in the U.S., so whatever comes in now is basically, yeah. But if a lot of these companies didn't have the development kits at launch, that's why also you're not seeing a lot. But then that also helps because the discoverability. People always said, it's very hard because there's so much slop that was coming in to the Nintendo Switch 1 eShop of like hentai games and stuff like that. And people are just like, and like games that were like what were called like asset flips. So, you know, the fact that I like the fact that Nintendo is making it kind of a thing of get a development kit on a need to basis. Like if your game can still run on Switch 1, then do it there. But most indie games don't need development kits. So give those priority to the bigger companies that are using more of the features and things of Switch 2. So like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell and the notification to know when I drop in my next video. And you have a great rest of your day. Later.